Academic, your potentially educational podcast. This is the topic section of the show for May 2025. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado. And against all the evil that hell can conjure, all the wickedness that mankind can produce, I will send unto them only this podcast. Talk and gab until it is done.
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night. And I've been looking for my pet rabbit. You know, she's gone missing. Has anyone seen her? I'd really appreciate you letting me know. I'm sure she's fine. I'm sure that everything is okay. Nothing has happened to my pet rabbit. But if something has, there will be hell to pay.
If you can't tell from this introduction, our topic for the month of May is Doom. Now, Doom can mean a lot of different things, but in specific, we are talking about the Doom video games from the 1990s, the original PC Doom shooters. We both played Doom, the original 1994, and Doom 2, Hell on Earth, among some other little odds and ends around Doom, because, of course, the new Doom game, The Dark Ages, is coming out this month. In fact, it's already out by the time we're recording this, so you might have played some of it already. And that is out from Bethesda and id Softworks. We have talked before about the 2016 Doom reboot, the sequel Doom Eternal. So we've done plenty of Doom talk on this show, and we've talked around the 90s Doom games a lot, but I don't think we've ever had an actual sit-down conversation about why those games are so awesome and why we love them so much, because they are, for both of us, some of our favorite games ever made, even though neither of us were really there when those were new. I mean, we were alive in the 90s, but we were both 2 years old when Doom came out in 1994. We were not playing it yet, and so we came to them later, but I think it is a testament to how amazing these games are that they hold up so phenomenally even today. And so we're going to talk about those and celebrate sort of classic Doom, where this all began. But because we can't leave, any shit-covered rock unturned on this fucking podcast, Sean also had the idea, this is your idea, Sean, to watch the 2005 movie called Doom, that for about 95% of its runtime has nothing to do with Doom, but for 5% of its runtime has some first-person stuff that kind of looks like Doom. Mostly it has nothing to do with Doom, but we're going to talk about it anyway for the lulz.
Yes, I mean, to be fair to me, Jonathan, I did run it by you. I sent you the text message when we were thinking about doing the Doom podcast, and I'm like, hey, they did make that Doom movie. We could do that, and you're the you had a very enthusiastic reply. So
I did. To be fair to me, I thought it was going to be more fun, and it wasn't. It was mostly just, like most bad movies, it was mostly just boring. But we'll talk about that at the end of today's show to make sure we bring ourselves back down to earth, more in line with what the outside world is like now, rather than the fun of the 1990s when all that the news had to talk about was, is Doom corrupting the youth?
And yes, it did. But that's cool. It made them fucking get into heavy metal and worship Satan and shit, and that's rad. So yes, it corrupted them, but we all need some corruption in our life.
So Sean, I mean, let's start from the beginning. What is your history with the Doom franchise outside of the new, Bethesda stuff, the actual classic, PC Doom, I guess we could call it, but the classic, Doom games? That the official releases are Doom and Doom 2, but obviously there is much, much, much more to the wide and wonderful world of Doom than just those games.
Yeah, so as you said earlier, we obviously were way too young when the original games came out for us to play them then, right? So I never really I didn't do lots of PC gaming until the mid to late 2000s, but that's not how I got into Doom. How I got into Doom was through the Xbox 360, Xbox Live Arcade re-release of Doom and Doom 2 that happened, and that was a big kind of, I think for a lot of people, was a way to kind of rediscover Doom and Doom 2, because it was the first time since the PlayStation 1, I believe, that it had been on consoles. There was a whole range of console ports of Doom that happened in the late 90s, most of them seemingly not being very good. The PlayStation 1 one is one of the few that people really liked, but I didn't have a PlayStation 1. I never played any of those console ports. So the first one I did was that console port of for the Xbox 360 for Doom 1 and Doom 2, and I really, really loved it. I got super into playing those games, and it kind of shocked me because I played them on a kind of whim, because again, I hadn't grown up with it. I had no particular affinity, not just for Doom, but for that whole style of shooter. The Doom clone style of first-person shooter was just not a thing for me. The first time I got into first-person shooters was with the original Halo Combat Evolved. Like, I didn't even really like stuff like GoldenEye on the N64 particularly. So there was a really like kind of interesting, epiphany moment of playing that original Doom game on the 360 and just being like, fuck, this game is so good. Like, I think the original Doom holds up better than basically like any game of that generation and any game of that like kind of vintage. Like, the original Doom is still so perfect. And I felt that then, and then I've revisited that game many, many times over the years. Particularly like Doom 1, I end up replaying pretty frequently. And that's kind of the way I like it as well, is I like it on a controller. Like, I think it's one of the interesting things about original Doom, because it predates mouse look, as a like standard for first-person shooters on PC. Obviously, original Doom only has the lateral movement, and it just kind of auto determines the height of the shot based on where you're aiming. If there's a enemy at like a higher altitude than your character, it will just automatically adjust that. You don't really need mouse aiming. Obviously, you can do mouse aiming, that's fine. But there's something about like a controller, modern day controller, feels like it is like for me, the optimal way to play it. Just the sense of it is a more comfortable way of doing what would be the equivalent of the keyboard controls back then. And that was always something I found very fascinating about it, is you kind of have in your head that, oh, this is your like the OG PC shooter, and yet in some ways it feels more like a console shooter, with how much it is so much about just the movement of your character outmaneuvering projectiles. Like, I feel like the movement on the left stick is way more important than the movement on the right stick if you're playing on a controller. And that was a thing that I remember just being surprised by. And then obviously, like, eventually you have Doom 2016 coming out, and that game kicked all kinds of ass. Doom Eternal came out, and that game kicked all kinds of ass. And so when the new Doom stuff came out, I would then also go back and play through Doom 1 and Doom 2 again. I've also played Doom 64. I did that a while ago, like probably 4 years ago or something like that. But yeah, that's kind of, for me, what Doom is just this game I discovered on the Xbox 360 as this is a thing that is still a perfect video game now, and then just keep on replaying it every couple of years I come back to Doom.
Yes, absolutely. So my history is a little different. My dad was very much into like PC games of that 90s, early 2000s vintage. It's funny when you say PC gaming now, and it means, a giant, crazy $20,000 rig with crazy RGB lights and, 120 FPS on something, and a very expensive gaming mouse, because that's not what PC gaming, my dad was just in a little office with like a Dell, desktop, and it was very different. But no, he played and I remember, I've talked about this on the show before, like he played all the Myst games, and we would watch him play those. But the other thing he liked was particularly some of the Duke Nukems from that era, like Duke Nukem 3D, which is obviously very related to Doom. And some of that stuff. And I think Wolfenstein was one of those too. I don't remember him ever playing Doom, but I do remember like experiencing that era of shooter through that. And then I definitely did play Doom 1 a bit on that Xbox Live Arcade release that you're talking about, Sean, because I think that had like a huge rediscovery for a lot of people in our generation, I think, when that came out, because it was a really good release of that game. But I didn't get super into Doom until the Bethesda reboot era, where I really liked the 2016 game. That got me exploring the classic Doom stuff a little bit more. And then I think it was I am on the line of people, side of the line, that did not really care for Doom Eternal. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in that game,
yes,
but I
people on the wrong side of history, you mean?
The people who don't like really, really over-designed Doom games that make you fight the same boss in the same way roughly 70,000 times over the course of that game.
Horrible mischaracterization of Doom Eternal.
Okay, it's correct, but that's fine. Anyway, Doom Eternal, not a huge fan of it, and it got me more into playing classic Doom as a way of trying to understand, like, what didn't I like about this game? And I remember going really far down the rabbit hole at that point, and that's when I installed GZ Doom on my computer. That's like one of the modern, like, fan modules for playing Doom. It's hard to say because it's not a port or anything. It is like a native thing that runs basically any Doom WAD file you can throw at it. And so, I started with Doom and Doom 2, but then, there's a wide world of Doom WADs that you can throw at that thing. And GZ Doom is really cool because it can also do stuff like, if you do want to play with a mouse and keyboard, it's modded it to have free look, so it feels more like a modern shooter when you do that. And that's a fun way to play it. And I got really into it there, and Doom, since then, so for the last 5 years or so, has been something I do just periodically bring up on my computer when I feel like it and play a level or two just at random. And it's just kind of a constant thing that I cycle through. For this podcast, I did specifically play the PlayStation 5, the version that's out now on consoles, that is really, really cool. And I want to recommend, if people have not gotten into Doom, this is the way to do it, is the current Doom 1, Doom 2 pack that they have, because that has not only the complete Doom and Doom 2 for consoles running really well, like on PS5 you can run it at 120 FPS, all of that good stuff, widescreen, all of that support, but then also it has basically every canonical release that was in any way official or semi-official. So all of the master levels, all the final Doom stuff. It also has some of the stuff they did later, like No Rest for the Living. And then it does have the 2 sigil games that John Romero made much later that were not official releases, I guess, but now are official releases. So that's really cool that that's all in there. And then there's a bunch of mod stuff you can do too. But that is a very complete collection of everything that you would say is official to semi-official in the Doom pantheon. And if you supplement that with the Doom 64 port that is out now, you can have it all in one place, which is really cool. So yeah, I played through all of Doom 1 and Doom 2 on that version. And I played through at least a little bit of everything else that is in that pack. I played through Doom 64. I've played through some of Doom 64 again before. And yeah, I played about 25 hours of that Doom port, according to my PlayStation 5 for this podcast. So I played a lot of it. And again, I had played through all of it in various forms over the years, but this was the most concentrated sit down, play end to end, all of Doom and Doom 2 particular for this. And I just love these games. And the Doom Eternal connection is just there's why I think I got really into these games after my feeling of disappointment with Eternal was that I do think there's such a great simplicity but also sophistication to the structure of the original Doom, with the sort of maze-like thing with the running and gunning, and it doesn't always work. I think Doom 2 goes pretty far off the rails at a certain point and is not all that fun. But when it's good, and particularly, you get into the semi-official stuff like Final Doom and the stuff that the community made is often really, really great. There's just nothing quite like the sheer satisfaction of going through those original Doom games. And I love them so much. And you said, Sean, that they haven't aged a day, and it's true. They obviously don't look like shooters today, but they still look really cool. The music is still really cool. It plays super well. As you were noting, it plays very well on a controller. It plays great, mouse and keyboard too, if you want to do it that way. But it works on modern consoles. It is just amazing how completely current those games still feel 31 years later.
Yeah, and absolutely, I'm with the Night Dive port. That is definitely the thing to do. So that's that Doom plus Doom 2. That is also obviously what I did this playthrough on, because that came out in August of this year. And way before we had conceptualized that eventually we would do a Doom podcast, I had actually played through all of episode 1 and halfway through episode 2 of Doom on that port, and I fell off that playthrough because it was right when the semester was starting. But it's a very cool release. If you had bought the Doom or Doom 2 releases, which were the Unity engine ports that they had done for PlayStation 4 previously, these are you can just download these versions. So you get those for free if you previously bought Doom or Doom 2 on PS4/Xbox One. And yeah, they are awesome ports. They are basically the best ports you can get, especially because Doom, because of its sort of vintage, it's got weird sort of frame rate issues where it isn't necessarily designed to run at exactly 60 frames per second or intervals of 60 frames per second. So there are weird hitches in animation that can happen in the older ports. And Night Dive, which is the studio that handled these ports, are like the masters of this stuff. I mean, they've done basically all the really great high quality modern ports of these kinds of old school shooters.
They did the Star Wars one too.
Yes.
Which one is that called? Star
Wars Dark Forces. Yeah.
Yes, which I also love. Anything like Doom, and that's a very good port of a really cool game too.
Yeah, and so this is like the definitive version of Doom. Outside of if you want to go down the rabbit hole on PC and get your whole like kind of like community versions of Doom that are modded, and you can do all kinds of obviously insane stuff with ray traced Doom and all kinds of weird nonsense on PCs with Doom. But if you want just like the sort of like classic kind of Doom standard experience with the option to have some mods, because it does have mod support, but if you just want the like what essentially are these releases, that is the way to do it, is to play that release. And yes, so I replayed all of Doom and Doom 2 on that one, and then I kind of sampled a little bit of everything else. I tend to favor the like id Software stuff, like Doom and Doom 2, quite a bit more than the fan stuff, because I feel like a lot of those other kind of fan-made packs at the time, like Master Levels and all that stuff, are really inconsistent in quality. Like you can have really great levels and then like really bullshit levels, but they are still fun, and it's interesting to just run through and see like what is all this fucking crazy shit. And then you of course have Sigil 2, you've got No Rest for the Living, which I believe that was what the Doom 2 port on 360 had that, and then Legacy of Rust, which is a new original campaign, which I did not get super far in because it is very fucking hard. If I think it's designed to be played co-op, because you have co-op on this version, and is like they throw a lot of shit at you. But that is also really cool. So yes, this is definitely the version to play if you want to play Doom now, is to get this.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, they're a ton of fun. So I guess let's just dive into the games. Like, Sean, what to you makes, and I know this is a big question,
yes,
but what makes Doom in this, the classic id games, what makes it so special and like replayable to the present day and feel so current in a world where, shooters are a very different beast than Doom, and maybe they never were quite the same as Doom, but we live in a very different world than 1994. Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of different pieces to that. I think one that obviously is really essential is that first-person shooters became a very different thing, right? Yeah. And particularly with Half-Life 1 is where you really have this hard push into the like more kind of like linear campaign style thing of where there's like a storyline. The levels are designed to be like kind of logically built areas that have a kind of cohesion to them. That is shuffling the player from one set piece to the next, and you have set piece designed moments and stuff like that. That is very like focused and a little bit more kind of like theme park ride adjacent, which is awesome. Like I love Half-Life. I love Half-Life 2. I love shooters in that mold, and that's basically for modern first-person shooter to one extent or another comes from that model. But before Half-Life, you really did have this kind of first-person shooters coming out of maze games on the PC, and that's kind of where the origin of all this stuff comes from. Is originally it's like really raw, here is a maze that is being drawn, and maybe you have a weapon, maybe you don't, but you are navigating a maze. And that is what the kind of original first-person games were. And then slowly that evolved to then include, you've got weapons, and then eventually, obviously, you have id making Wolfenstein 3D, which really pushes into what will become what you think of as the Doom or the boomer shooter, as we kind of call them now, where you have that maze design, that kind of labyrinthine nature of here's like this big open level where you've got multiple different kinds of keys and stuff, and it is, a big part of it is navigating and exploring the level to get all the different secrets and all the pieces you need to eventually get to the exit. And it's more about that, and it is not about the set piece thing. You're not having the same kinds of like, here is a big, very designed kind of boss fight encounter. You'll have boss fights, but they're just a big enemy in a big room, and you just shoot them with a big gun, and that's it. You're not having like unique mechanics or anything like that. And so they're very kind of flatly designed games in that way, where you have an essential set of mechanics and weapons and enemies, and it's so much about the level design kind of bringing those things to life. I think the thing that's really crazy about Doom, and the thing that makes Doom so good, is I think it is this kind of inflection point where Doom is the point at which these kinds of games have everything they need to be like perfect. And you can actually really experience it within Doom 2 very distinctly, because Doom 2 has 2 secret levels that are modified versions of Wolfenstein 3D levels. So 2 of the secret levels in Doom 2 that you can access, one of them is a modified version of the original level of Wolfenstein 3D. One of them is a modified version of the first boss fight in Wolfenstein 3D. And one of the big things with Wolfenstein 3D is that you couldn't have different elevation in the levels. So all the levels are perfectly flat. And you also can't have arbitrary angles on the walls. And so the walls are very boxy. And Doom, like one of the big technical innovations of Doom, is you can have arbitrary angles for the level design, and you can have like different elevations. So you can have places where you go up, places where you could go down, like big drops and stuff. And for these kind of faux 3D games at the time, that was a technical innovation. It sounds very quaint now, the idea of like, oh, and you can go up a flight of stairs. You could not go up a flight of stairs in this kind of video game previously. And I think that is like one of those last things that's really needed to make the level design have the kind of variety it needs. You also have other really essential technical innovations that I think are kind of fundamental for this sort of game, which is lighting, or like the simulated idea of lighting, where you've got sort of lighting sectors in Doom, where you define different like regions, and then within that region, the shading of all the colors in that region can change, and so you can make it shade brighter, or you can have it shade darker. And then you can also, the big thing they have is that when you shoot the guns, it can then change that lighting, quote unquote, instantly, right? You're obviously not talking about ray tracing. You're not talking about actual simulated lighting in a kind of physics-based sense. You're purely talking about you're looking at certain thresholds and just changing the shading of the colors in that threshold. But it simulates the idea of lighting, and it's one of the things that allows, again, a huge amount of variety in both the visual design, but also the kind of gameplay design of those levels. And Doom, just to me, there's all those little specific technical innovations that Doom 1 has that pushes it from this threshold of being a thing that is like really interesting, like Wolfenstein 3D, but I think is so archaic, it's kind of hard to get into. Like, I've never played Wolfenstein 3D to completion because I find it too basic. It's too simplified. There's too little to it. Doom has like just enough where it pushes it over the threshold, where it has absolutely everything it needs to do everything it wants to do. And then the designers execute on all those individual components to their utmost perfection. And so the sound design is perfect. The music is perfect. The combat design in terms of the enemies and the weapons and how those all interact is basically fucking perfect. The whole visual aesthetic is gorgeous, and the use of sprites is so evocative and so like effective and creates such a mood for the player. And then the design of the levels that the core like small handful of people working at id Software at the time did take advantage of all those mechanics perfectly. And so there's this technical innovation that brings it to this point where it has all the tools that it needs. And then you have this group of young game designers who all are executing all those different features at the top of their game. And so I think it's a combination of those two things that makes Doom kind of just like evergreen as a video game concept. Is it is the like essence of this kind of first person shooter boiled down to its most essential technical simplicity, but that technical simplicity executed with a really high level of sophistication, which pushes it above lots of other boomer shooters of that era that I have tried to play that I've never really gotten into, because I've played a lot of them, but have never really felt compelled to play them to completion. Whereas Doom, like, I just get absorbed into it every time because I think all those pieces are executed at such a high level of like such a masterpiece level of execution.
Yeah, I think that's all 100% correct. And I think the idea that it has like all the elements it needs is really important, because obviously we see people still making stuff basically in this engine to this day to have fun with it, including people at id just remixing those elements. And it is very much sort of infinitely permutable. I don't know how to say that word, but you know what I mean. Permeable? Is that what I mean? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Permutable. I think you could argue that's a word. Okay.
Yeah. It has many permutations. And obviously part of that also is that when you look at because I really do think like Doom 1 which I said 94, I meant 1993. I apologize. Anyone leaving a comment? There you go. It was late. It was December 10th, 1993 is the original release of Doom, so I was off on that. But the original, I guess the original was 3 episodes, but the fourth episode was added in Ultimate Doom. But the original 4 episodes of Doom, that to me is like the peak perfect, that's Doom. Like, that's like one of my 10 favorite video games ever. That's just an amazing, amazing video game. And I think when you look at that game, like just the set of weapons you have, the general progression in particularly that first episode of getting everything, the world expanding, seeing all the things sort of this game has in store for you, the way they kind of ratchet up the difficulty of both enemy encounters and mazes and making you sort of, teaching you how to play your game, how to play their game, but without any kind of, overt tutorial or anything like that. And obviously it would have had some community stuff around it. It would have had an instruction manual to go with it, but it would not, it does not have any on-screen prompts to tell you that, you need to find the red key to get into and you need to make sure you focus on your keys and the blah, blah, blah. None of that.
And here's a compass at the top of the screen with an arrow that's pointing you to where the blue key is. Yeah, you don't need any of that stuff.
Yeah, and it not only does it not have it, but you don't need it. It teaches you how to play it. And and then all of course, the enemy types that you encounter, and as it gets harder and harder with the different enemy types and varieties, it is just addictive. And I don't know what else to say about it than that word. I think that is it is a very addictive form of game where you can lose a lot of time playing Doom, particularly if it is a level that the maze gets a little difficult for you, and then, you're running around like a rat in a fucking maze, bringing up your map, looking for everything, like, where have I not gone? But I think that element of it is very fun as well, and it is something that just does feel so different from your modern first-person shooter, and I'm not putting that down, as you were saying, Sean, like with the Half-Life design or the Halo style of design. It is a very different thing, where usually they tend to be more linear, they tend to be more guided in telling you where to go, and they tend to be more built around major set pieces. And obviously that can be very fun. Halo Combat Evolved is also one of my 10 favorite games ever made, so I'm not putting that down. But I do think the unique fun of Doom is how relatively open it feels, in a way that feels like, the antecedents of Doom today are more almost in like exploration games, open world games, horror games, like a Resident Evil or something, than it is like fast first-person shooters. And so having that sense of that, these levels, they're linear in the sense that there's a beginning and an ending, and you have to get out and then you go play the next level. But they are very open in the sense that, this environment is there, and you just kind of pick apart at it and find the keys or find the switches or whatever else you need to kind of open and let this environment that we have built kind of come into like solidity for you and make come into clarity for you, almost like solving a Rubik's Cube and figuring out how does the puzzle come together. But while you're doing that, you're listening to sick-ass metal music and shooting demons in the face with either the second best shotgun in the history of video games, or in Doom 2, the best shotgun in the history of video games. And all the other guns are great, but the shotguns are the best. And it is just solving the puzzle and doing all of that while also having to shoot demons in the face. It is just the most peanut butter and jelly thing in the history of video games, of just like two things that don't inherently go together. There's plenty of games that are about shooting monsters in the face that don't have any kind of maze exploration puzzle component, and there's plenty of games that have a maze puzzle exploration component. There's a very much an affinity between something like Myst, which is 1994, and Doom, which is 1993, as weird as that sounds, but they are about exploring big open areas and finding the connections between them and making sense of the geography of the place. But, Myst would be a better game if you got to shoot people in the face. And that's what Doom provides. And that is why it is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, again, you have to just keep in mind that, like, the notion of games built in 3D was still novel when Doom came out. So, to the extent where Doom is, like, is effectively a 3D game, but it is supported by large amounts of 2D elements, right? All the, like, your HUD, the weapon, the enemies, the items in the world, all those things are purely 2D elements. They're just sprites, right? That's why they sort of spin in awkward ways when you try to rotate around them, because you can't rotate around them, because they're not 3D, they're 2D. And they can create multiple angles of 2D sprites that sort of can create the sense that they've got a depth to them, but it snaps to snap awkwardly because there is no in-betweens, right? And so I think it's the thing of this era of 3D games, before you have 3D consoles at home and stuff like that, is that the notion of exploring an environment in 3D in and of itself in a video game is a novel idea. Like that the notion of exploring in a 3D space is enough to support the idea of an entire video game, which is what Doom's predecessors relied upon, that didn't necessarily have combat, or certainly did not have combat as involved as Doom did. And so there is just something about that I think you know, not that you can't make a game like Doom today and still find an audience. Obviously you do. There are people who make modern versions of Doom shooters, but they're very niche. They play to a very small audience on the PC. And, you know, like, but like, I think the kids I teach would not be like sort of amazed or wowed or enthralled purely at the idea of navigating a space in 3 dimensions. But back in the day, that was the sort of like core conceit of so many of these kinds of games. And so I do think that there is something really fun about what you're talking about with Doom, that because modern games can't really do this as a main concept and be a kind of big budget major release, you don't get this sort of design. But in Doom, you do get this design of being able to sort of look at this big open 3D maze that is totally unguided, that you're just poking and prodding at the edges. And I like how you kind of put it, you have to eventually make sense of it, that it's this big mysterious space, and then slowly you put together in your brain the logic of how all of it is constructed to then eventually allow you to get to the ending. And that's just a gameplay concept that a major modern video game just can't reasonably do, and I think attract a big audience. The only way a new game can do this is to focus on a very niche audience. But there's something really amazing about that kind of design, and there's something that still feels kind of fresh about it because so much of video gaming has gone away from that and taken the notion of like exploring these kinds of 3D areas totally for granted, or they do them in these like much more grandiose ways in an Elden Ring or a modern Assassin's Creed or something, where they are gigantic, ridiculous, massive open worlds that are so much more complicated in structure than a single Doom level. But you start approaching a different sort of gameplay conceit at that point. And so,
the
it's just
games that today I think scratch that part of the itch are more in the kind of Resident Evil or Metroidvania kind of thing, and I 100% include Dark Souls in Metroidvania. That's what it is also, like, right? And like part of the Dark Souls peanut butter and jelly is taking that and combining it with this very, exacting, difficult but open, combat style. But those are also much, much bigger worlds generally. The Metroid breakthrough is it being an entire contiguous space, right? That you go through, and then that's what you get in, your Metroid Primes and your Castlevania Symphony of the Nights and all of those. Resident Evil also tends to be contiguous, although it will have, spaces like, the police station, and then that'll break off into something else. And those are very fun. But I agree that, and obviously I love those games to death. Resident Evil 2002, also one of my favorite, I'm just listing all my favorite games. There's a reason why Doom appeals to me in this specific way. But it is, you go back to this game, and I do think it is exactly what you're saying, Sean. It is the more focused that these are. You can sit down for half an hour and get that feeling of a completion of that exploration within the realm of a single level or a single map in Doom, while having also the fun of shooting all the aliens in the face or the zombie marines and stuff like that. But I also do think in the same way that I think Metroidvanias or the Resident Evil style of game are really hard to make, and even within their own series, there are ones that do it better and worse. Within Dark Souls, there's Dark Souls 1, but then there's also Dark Souls 2, right? Mm-hmm. And this kind of thing that if you tip a little bit too far to the right or to the left, or you get a little bit off, these things can be tough. And I think you see that in Doom. There are plenty of not as good levels in Doom, and I think particularly Doom 2, where I feel like the balance can go okay, this maze is too opaque and there's no way you would actually reason this out. It requires you stumbling upon something or looking up a guide. Or, they've thrown too many enemies onto this level and it becomes too much about the twitchy kind of running around, dodging and fighting. And I feel and that's okay. I also feel this about lots of other series I love, but it is interesting within Doom because of the level by level thing. You can see where, okay, this level has the balance in perfect mixture, and then you can see ones that go, okay, this one goes too far this way. But I also think analytically, that's part of the fun of playing these and seeing the exact mixture of what they were concocting here and why Doom works. It is an interesting, volatile blend of chemistry that can go off pretty easily.
Yeah, because it's such a level-focused game, everything is in these bite-sized chunks. Because that's also the thing that enables it to have here's Ultimate Doom and Final Doom and the master levels of Doom 2, those different releases in Sigil and all that kind of stuff. And then that's just the sort of id Software supported kind of releases to some extent. You then have the virtually infinite number of Doom levels that have been made throughout the history of that video game that are still being made on online communities. You can't do that with those other games. You can't just have a fan throw together a Metroid Prime level in an afternoon or make another mansion for Resident Evil. Those spaces in those more modern kinds of exploration focused games are just so much more sophisticated, both in terms of design, but also just in terms of the technical components of what make them up is so much more complicated. Whereas the very simple nature of the boxes, basically the lines in which a Doom game is made up, is so simple that anybody can learn that level editor very quickly and then start throwing together random maps and stuff like that. And so you do just have this sort of iterative process with Doom that is so rapid that the community can take part in it. And it is very inconsistent. There are lots of Doom levels that are bad, even in the official releases, even in Doom and Doom 2, especially if you're including episode 4 of Doom 1, which I think has some very up and down maps. But the thing is that it's a single map and you're through with it in 15 minutes or something. And you're on to the next one. And so there is this kind of eating candy element to the game of where, maybe this flavor wasn't my favorite. Maybe I don't like grape Skittles all that much, but I'm going to come in and get another handful, and now I have an orange Skittle, right? You're just can keep on getting more and more levels and get more ideas thrown at you. And it's such a simple game in its foundation that the output can be so varied because there's so many things that these creators can do because they don't have to create a complicated, massive 3D environment built out of polygons and stuff like that. It's just a bunch of lines and boxes that you are barreling through at very high speeds and shooting little 2D sprites of demons in the face with your 2D sprite of a shotgun, and that's it. And there is a real elegance to that technical foundation of the game.
I mean, Sean, can you think of another game or franchise or whatever that has the equivalent of a Chex Quest? That Doom has its very famous serial. If you don't know this story, there's lots of good video breakdowns on YouTube. John Oliver discovered this a few years ago on Last Week Tonight and went off on it for 10 minutes because it is so funny, particularly if you aren't into video games that much. But basically, this was a set of basically Doom WAD files that were made for a Chex cereal tie-in that you would buy the cereal in the 90s and it would give you a CD and it was basically a game. But the way they were able to do that is that basically a single teenage designer made this Chex-skinned version of Doom, but it's not skinned. It is skinned, but then it is also new original levels in Doom. And again, it is basically just a Doom WAD file. You can play it on GZ Doom now, but that is how it was made and distributed, to the point that there is a Chex Mix 2 or Chex Quest 2 and 3, and they've had a Steam, sold remaster of it and everything. And those games are fucking crazy. And I can't immediately think of any other game that has had the equivalent of its Chex Quest moment, just to tell you how, weird and completely elastic this concept is.
Yeah, because it's also it's both that the foundations of the technical makeup of the game are so accessible and that they're easy to understand. It is also that they were made accessible, right? It's
Yes.
Obviously something like a Super Mario Brothers, as we know from Super Mario Maker. It's super easy to make a Mario level from a technical perspective on a basic way, especially if you're given a kind of modern level editor kind of thing. I'm sure making on the actual Famicom at the time was probably not simple. But making those tools easy to use and accessible to an audience is the thing that you did with PC games. Doom would not be the first game to do that, but it's definitely the most popular game that did that and the most successful game to have done that. And that is one of those things that is just so cool about Doom and its huge legacy in history, is that it was so open. And obviously this is a big id Software thing. But also you had the way you could play it, where you could get episode 1 of Doom for free in just its shareware. You could just share it with people. And then if you wanted to play episodes 2 and episode 3, you'd have to then order the actual full game. But it became, one of the reasons it became such a like nationwide sensation so quickly is because it could spread like wildfire by people installing it on their school computers and shit like that, because it's just, you can play episode 1. And also episode 1 is the best part of Doom. So it's like, I like episode 2 and 3 a lot, but if you're going to like, as a promotional strategy for a game, it's a hell of a fucking thing to just be able to give anybody a burned fucking CD or whatever of episode 1 of Doom and be like, here you go, and put it on your fucking school computer and hope that the teacher doesn't see you and just play through episode 1 of Doom. And it is just became such a viral sensation. And it's
something
just it's just part of the legacy of that game is so cool.
Totally. And I wanted to pause on that for a second, because that also just feels like, and I know this is a little odd, because this is very much us looking back at a period we lived through but not really, experienced.
Yes.
But, like, it is fascinating for me to try to, like, contrast that to now. I think about this also, Sean, with, like, the era of VHS, where it was so easy to record a movie off TV, copy a tape you legally owned, share that with friends, how open that environment was. Obviously, VHS didn't look great, but it was a really easy way to, like, get and share movies and TV episodes and recordings and all of that stuff. And it was this period of openness that obviously had no economic downside for the studios and everybody. They made fucking bank on VHS tapes. But it was very also, like, consumer friendly in a way that is, like, we have shifted so far in the opposite direction, where, like, you can't watch a Blu-ray without a 20-second, don't pirate this thing you legally bought ad. And it is not easy to copy and rip and, like, share, Blu-rays or DVDs. And everything is locked on streaming. And it's, again, like, that has been so locked down in such a different way now. And video games are kind of the same way. When you think of, like, the Doom era, you could play Doom on just about anything, right? Yeah. And it was very easy, as you just said, to share that. And it was much more open. And it didn't, id made plenty of fucking money on it, right? Like, they became, especially the original inventors of Doom became fabulously wealthy off of this stuff. But there was also an openness and an ability to share it. And when you think about, your modern PC games, just the hardware you need to run games on a computer just goes above and beyond what you would need to run, your computer that you would have for work. And there are, I guess you could say there are some games that are in that vein of they can run on anything, but they tend to be your free-to-play, quote-unquote, games, like, your Fortnite or Overwatch or something, that are actually very, very predatory in their business practices, particularly as it pertains to children and, younger people who play them. And the way that has, like, shifted and curdled over the years is so gross in that way, and also makes me feel like another part of Doom's legacy, the, parental Congress backlash to Doom in the 90s and early 2000s, is so funny when you look back on it, because, Doom had none of the, like, obvious harm that later eras of this stuff have had on people, like social media and, free-to-play games with predatory, gambling-esque business stuff that have had, like, real impacts that have not been attacked nearly as hard by, these groups. But also because Doom is such a cartoony, silly version of violence, it's impossible for me to imagine anyone actually being, negatively impacted by it. But, yeah, it is so fascinating to think about those multiple eras and how much we've kind of clamped down and gone in a different direction since the 90s on that. Everything is worse now than it was in the 90s, arguably, but that's one way.
Yes, yeah. And I have to correct myself. I realized I said you could burn a CD. No, it would have been a floppy disk.
Yes, it would have been
that's how fucking old this shit is. But yeah, and in that way, like, in many ways, the successor of that component of Doom, the virality of Doom and the way it can spread, is not the domain of, like, Doom the Dark Ages or Doom Eternal or Doom 2016 or any of those kinds of modern games. It is Roblox, and it's specifically Roblox if you're picking one game, but it's games of that ilk, which have, as you say, actual real issues that, like, the government should look at.
Yeah, like Roblox, you can make stuff, and then Roblox will sell it and get money for it, and, like, you will be turned into a worker for Roblox without compensation, and that's weird. Whereas, if you're making your Doom wads back in the 90s, you're just making stuff for fun and sharing it with a community. It's like the way commerce came up around this, maybe inevitable, but a little, depressing.
Very much so. But to get back to the essence of Doom, because I feel like we've gone on a big tangent there. I do think it is worth just kind of breaking down some of the gameplay components outside of the map design that are so essential to make it so good. One of them being the feeling of the weapons, which I just think is so fucking good. And it's that the simple just... When we're talking about that, it has everything it needs. It's like, at the end of the day, in order to make the weapons feel good, you just need a couple of handful of things to work really well. You need the sound design to be really good. You need the visual feedback of you firing the weapon to be really good. You need the visual feedback of the weapon hitting the enemy to be really good. Basically, you need those three things, and Doom it's so fucking perfect on all those things, especially for taking what is like the weapon of Doom, particularly Doom 1, which is the shotgun. The weapon that you're using like 95% of the time in the original Doom. And it is just so satisfying because the sound effect is incredibly meaty. The visual register of you're lifting up the shotgun and pumping it. Again, it's just like a 2D sprite animation with a tiny handful. It's got to be like 5 or 6 frames. I mean, it's like nothing. But that combined with the being able to see the spread, I think is very satisfying, and I like the flat line of the spread, and you just have such a clear sense as a player of Doom, like at what ranges the shotgun is effective and how much, because you can visually register where each shot is landing. But then also when the shots hit an enemy and kill them, the simple sprite animation for each enemy of them turning into, goop basically, and the violence of the game, which is, very cartoonish, particularly from a modern perspective, but is hugely satisfying. And it just you just have those animations of imps and zombie soldiers and stuff getting hit, making their death sound effect, and then falling into a pile of little 2D sprite, gore. It's just burned into your brain because it's so satisfying, and that feeling of instant responsiveness and visual and audio feedback is so perfect. And it is that thing that there are lots and lots of first person shooters post to Doom that just can't get those pieces right. And it is, to me, it's the most fundamental thing. It's if you're a first person shooter, is the first box you have to check to be good is, are the sound effects on the guns good? Is the visual effect of the gun being fired good? Is the visual effect of the gun hitting an enemy good? Have you done all those things? Yes. Then you are at least a good first-person shooter. Maybe everything else is shit, but at least firing the guns is a satisfying part of the gameplay. And there shockingly are games that are bad at that. And Doom, again, in its very primitive, basic way, it is perfect at it because it just has all those pieces lined up perfectly. And there's kind of no extra stuff getting in the way of that kind of visual audio experience. It's just so pure and jacked straightly into your fucking brain. And it is very satisfying to do.
It is extreme. I mean, to this day, there's just very little more satisfying than firing the shotgun in Doom. One of the only more satisfying things is firing the super shotgun in Doom 2. And I've been thinking a lot about why is this very simple thing so satisfying? Because video game shotguns often feel satisfying. The shotgun is one of the best guns in every Halo game, for instance, too. But, I think it's everything you just said, Sean. I think it is also, the timing of the firing and everything in Doom is dialed in so perfectly. The rhythm with which you fire, you pull the trigger or hit the mouse button or whatever. You see the shotgun animation happen, you see the enemy go down, and you see the, shotgun have to, pump action reload, not reload, but have to, reset before you can fire again and then go. That rhythm is, meditative. I don't know what else to say about it, but it is if I'm going around a Doom level and I'm just firing my shotgun and hitting the enemies, I feel like I can get into a flow state in a way that very few other games and game weapons allow you to get into. And it only breaks if I run out of ammo, and then it's like, oh, I have to use a different gun, which is fine, because all the other guns are very fun too, although none of them are quite as fun as the shotgun or the super shotgun. Although I do very much, when I have the ammo for it, or when I put in the cheat code to just get infinite ammo, the plasma gun is also incredibly satisfying in a destroy everything right now kind of way. But like, yeah, I think that's part of it. I think the fact that it uses the sort of hit scan method, is that what it's called, right? Where
Yes.
the enemies, they throw, like the main demons will throw those fireballs at you, but they come slow enough that you can dodge, and so there's a lot of movement on your part. But if you fire, the moment you fire, it makes contact with the enemy. And so that kind of difference between you and the enemies, and the fact that you have this little kind of timing leg up on them, I also think is part of what makes that, again, that sense of rhythm and timing so perfectly dialed in. Is like and that's one of the things that I know Doom 2016 got back to and like really understood in a way that like maybe had become wayward over the years, not just in stuff like Doom 3, but other like first-person shooters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sense of rhythm is really essential to that feeling of Doom combat, because like you say, there is that sense of timing of like, you're firing shots at such a regular pace, partially because there's no reloading, which is one of the things that I think is really big that the modern Doom games picked up on, is like,
yes.
To be clear, I think the vast majority of first-person shooters should absolutely have reloading. It's like, it's a thing that most of these kinds of games should have. In fact, I am still frustrated that more first-person shooters don't do a more realistic version of reloading, where if you reload too early, you lose the ammo. That has not been actually shot in the clip, instead of having your magic ammo pool. Like, I wish more first-person shooters other than Doom made reloading into real mechanic, because I think it would enhance a lot of those kinds of games. But Doom, the super fast-paced, ridiculous combat where you're hurtling at like 30 miles an hour or whatever it is. At some point, someone calculated like what the actual speed of the Doom guy would be. That's some ridiculous fucking speed. If you like sort of, try to measure out what those levels would be like in real life, you're just sort of hauling ass like a fucking madman. But you're moving so quickly, and especially when you get to the later stuff and into Doom 2, there's so many enemies that you don't have time to fucking reload. That just gets in your way. And so that sense of rhythm, that there's no reloading, there's nothing interrupting that flow, is really essential. And while the shotgun has the most like percussive rhythm of all of it, because you've got the shot and then you've got the ch-ch, right? And you have that sort of whole component, this kind of 3-part rhythm to firing that gun. All the guns have a really great sense of rhythm. Like, I think this pace that with the chain gun fires has that feel. The plasma rifle has that fantastic mechanic of, you hold it down, and then when you let go, you have to bring it up for a second before you can start firing again. And so there's this little pause between bursts of the plasma gun that gives it this very distinctive, like, and you have to like hold off on it sometimes. And then you've got the rocket launcher when you really just want to like let shit go, and you can just hold down the fucking fire button with the rocket launcher and just go boom, 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 and fire off these shots. And that sense of rhythm is so sort of hypnotic, and it's one of those things that gets you into that sense of the flow state, and it's so satisfying. And also, I love what you brought up about the hit scan stuff, because I think Doom makes such a good use of this idea where you have weapons that are and are not hit scan, both for you and for the enemies, right? So the zombie soldiers that have the shotguns and the pistols or whatever, those enemies are hit scan, right? When you see the animation of them having fired, you get hit, or the environment gets hit as soon as that animation plays. The Spider Mastermind is the same way. So he's got the Spider Mastermind has the big chain gun, the boss at the end of episode 3 of Doom. And that is a hit scan weapon, which is why you can't be out in the open when he's shooting, or you will just get fucking chewed up by him. So there are a couple of enemies that have hit scan weapons. Most of your weapons are hit scan, other than the plasma gun, the rocket launcher, and the BFG are not. Those have projectiles that move. And so there is this nice sense of a balance of those two different things, where your like really powerful weapons are not hit scan, so it takes more skill to land those shots, right? A rocket launcher is a precious commodity, especially in Doom 1, but it is also a thing that's a lot harder to land the hit than it is with a shotgun. And I think that's a really great sense of tension in the mechanics, that it's a precious kind of ammo, but it's also a more difficult kind of ammo to use than the kind you're using all the time. And the plasma rifle is the same way. It's not as big of a deal because you fire lots of shots with it, but I think it's also why you're encouraged to fire it in bursts with that little hitch it has at the end of a firing cycle, is because you're going to miss way more plasma rifle shots than you are a chain gun shot. But then on the flip side, you have, with the enemies, you've got the majority of enemies you face, their weapons are not hit scan. They are clear projectiles that are big and glowing, and you can very clearly see them in the environment and try to maneuver around them. And that balance in the mechanics of the combat is very essential to getting that sense of flow state in Doom and making you feel very powerful, giving you tools to be able to avoid damage from the vast majority of enemies, but also create this sort of like sense of skill you need to use the more powerful weapons really effectively, and also a sense of frustration when you go through a mechanic or an encounter and you end up feeling like, fuck, I used like 10 rockets and probably I could have gotten through this with like 3. And it's got a little bit of that more almost like Resident Evil ammo management stuff on some of those levels where you can feel the kind of burn on that stuff and want to be careful about how you're using ammo sometimes. All those things come together and I think just really elevate that combat, which is one of those things that I think just Doom does better than like any of its contemporaries I've played, like a Duke Nukem 3D or Marathon or Shadow Warrior, like the dozens of incredibly racist first-person shooters that came out at the time, because there were a lot of very, very racist first-person shooters that came out in the 90s, you might not be surprised to know. But Doom just tops all of them in its combat design for all those simple elements coming together so beautifully.
Yes, and this is where Doom 2 becomes an interesting conversation. Because one of the big innovations Doom 2 made, well, the big innovation is Super Shotgun, which is just a double-barreled shotgun, but it's the best feeling gun in the history of it. It's unbelievable. I don't know if I can even describe how good the Super Shotgun feels, even when you don't need it. You're fighting enemies that you could kill in one hit with the regular shotgun. I find myself just using the Super Shotgun because it's just fun. It just is so much fun to just tear things up, because you can also get the widespread and hit like 3 enemies at once with it, and it feels so good. The other thing Doom 2 does, though, is it massively, massively expands the number of enemies that can be on the map. And so you can have much, much, much denser combat encounters. And I think that's where Doom 2 becomes interesting to me, because sometimes I think that can be incredibly fun and allow you to do like new things with the weapon pool that you couldn't before. It also makes good use of, again, that wider spread on the Super Shotgun. It also makes for some levels where I think they lean onto that as kind of a crutch, and the level becomes, the like map itself becomes a little dry and not all that interesting. But then you have an insane number of enemies that the challenge becomes, it feels like a little trollish to me of like how much they're throwing at you. There are some in the late game of Doom 2 that I don't know how I could beat without like throwing in a cheat code and just getting some ammo, because I don't know what you're supposed to do about it. And that's where I think the Doom 2 balance becomes a little bit off, whereas there's almost no points in Doom 1 where I feel that. Like, I played Doom 1 on the like second highest difficulty. I think it's Ultra Nightmare or something.
Ultra Violence.
Yeah. Ultra Violence. And I really enjoy that, and I feel like pretty dialed in on that all the way through. Doom 2, I can get through about half the game on that, and then it becomes like absurd bullshit that I can't deal with anymore. So that's one of the ways I say, again, I think the recipe of Doom is like volatile in interesting ways. But that's where Doom 2 does, I feel like, its shakeup of the formula both giveth and taketh in interesting ways.
Yeah, I think I like Doom 2 more than you do, but it definitely is like, it's got a different feel to it than Doom 1. And one of the things I think is interesting is it does, to a certain extent, remind me a little bit of like the difference between Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. Specifically just in terms of how the combat works, because for me, the big difference with Doom 2, outside of it just having different levels, is that Doom 2 like basically doubles the count of types of enemies that you can fight. Right? Doom 1 has a pretty conservative number of different enemies. You've got the 2 types of zombie soldiers. You've got imps. You've got the lost souls, which are the skulls. You've got cacodemons. And then you've got your like hell barons and hell knights. And then you've got one fight with the cyber demon. You've got one fight with the spider mastermind, which is a fine number of enemies. It's not really a problem in Doom 1. But what Doom 2 does is it adds a lot, right? It's got like the heavy weapons guys who have the big, they have the chain guns that they shoot at you. You've got the Revenants with the skeletons of the rocket launchers. You've got the Pain Elementals, which are the cacodemon-looking things that shoot Lost Soul skulls at you. You've got the Archvile, which can resurrect enemies and has his like fire attack he can hit you with. You've got the Arachnotrons, which are the tiny versions of the Spider Masterminds. You've got Mancubuses, which are the big fat dudes with 2 giant cannons. And you also have the Spider Mastermind and the Cyber Demon become somewhat regular enemies. Like, they just show up in levels of Doom 2, and you have to fucking deal with that shit. And so Doom 2 becomes, I think, by necessity, with if that is like your changes you're making mechanically, or what you're adding to the kind of the pot of what the game can do, is you've added 1 new weapon, and you have added a shit ton of more enemies, and particularly enemies that are in that upper tier. They're like all enemies that kind of fill out that, here's like your like upper range of monsters. Because in Doom 1, the Cacodemon is like one of the most powerful enemies you fight in Doom 1. And when a Cacodemon shows up in Doom 1, that's when you're like, maybe I should use a rocket launcher to get through this a little bit faster. Whereas in Doom 2, obviously the super shotgun is kind of there to just fucking mow through Cacodemons like they're nothing. And so because you filled up this upper register of enemies of power level, that then means that the plasma rifle and the rocket launcher, which used to be like secret weapons practically, like in episode 1 and episode 2, like you almost never use the rocket launcher or the plasma rifle because they are themselves rare, and their ammo is exceptionally rare, and is usually the kind of thing you find in the secret. Episode 3, you get a little bit more. Episode 4 for Doom is a different thing, and that came out later, so it's kind of outside the scope of what I'm looking at here. But with Doom 2, the plasma rifle and the rocket launcher are like essential parts of your overall kit. Every weapon, and this is the thing that brings me to that Doom Eternal comparison, every weapon in Doom 2 you have to use, and you have to use intelligently. Like if all you are doing in Doom 2 is using the super shotgun, you're going to have a bad day, because the super shotgun is a very satisfying solution to problems, but it's not always the best solution to every problem you face. Sometimes the plasma rifle against certain kinds of enemies is way better. Sometimes the rocket launcher against certain kinds of enemies is way better to use. And then obviously you also have the BFG 9000, which also in Doom 1 you fire maybe a couple times over an entire playthrough of the entirety of Doom 1. You're not using the BFG 9000 very frequently. Doom 2, it's a part of your kit that you're like having to fall back on. And so is the chainsaw, where there are scenarios made where you're clearly like, the chainsaw is what I should use here because they've designed the game to have you be pretty low on ammo at this point, and I should be using the chainsaw more frequently. And so there is this clear, I think, intent in the design in Doom 2 to get the player to use their whole range of options much more openly and much more actively, rather than just falling back to, I'm going to use the shotgun 90% of the time, and then every once in a while I'm going to go outside that comfort zone and use a different kind of gun. And I think with Doom 2, when that works, I really love it. And there are weapons in Doom 2, or there are levels in Doom 2 where that I find incredibly invigorating, particularly on the combat level, because you are so active and you're having to make really smart choices about what you're doing in specific encounters, what weapons you're using, right? Like, you should not be using a super shotgun against the Pain Elemental because they're firing fucking Lost Souls at you, and you're going to get crowded by these flying skulls because the super shotgun doesn't fire fast enough to stun the Pain Elemental. So you need to use the plasma rifle or the chain gun, because that can stun lock enemies because it fires so frequently. Like, those sorts of nuances of the mechanics of individual weapons become really important. I think the problem with Doom 2 is that can become incredibly exhausting, and that like there are just these levels that go on so long, and that kind of like deprioritized the level exploration thing, because there wasn't really anything new added to the suite of what you get or what you can do with exploring levels. The only thing new that was added is how do you engage with the combat. And so the combat is kind of overemphasized in certain levels in Doom 2, and when you're just going through and playing level after level, that gets very exhausting. And so that to me is like, to me, what the big difference is between the design of Doom and Doom 2.
I think that's a really good overview of it, and I would generally agree with that. And I think, like, my tastes in Doom tend to lean more towards I like having all the options for the guns, and the options for how to tackle scenarios, but I don't quite like the more proscriptive ways of doing it that I think Doom 2 can lean towards, Doom Eternal can lean towards, in sort of having to kind of, cycle through everything. But I do still enjoy it. Like, I want to stress, I think Doom 2 is a great game. I enjoy Doom 2 very much. I think its highs are very high. At its best, I agree that its combat does feel more satisfying than Doom 1. Mm-hmm. But again, at its best, it is a more uneven game than Doom 1. I think we both agree that, like, because, and I think you identified it right, that it doesn't add any new mechanics to the exploration, but it does add to the combat, so it leans heavier on that. And again, can lead to really interesting levels, can also lead to ones that are kind of frustrating. I think the way, like, also that it is structured as one big 30-level thing becomes exhausting. I do actually really like the episodic structure of Doom 1, where it feels like it can build and crescendo up to something, but then reset itself. And not reset itself all the way back to zero necessarily, but like in a way that feels like it can have a room to build again. Like, I do think that is one thing that is one of the reasons Doom 1 feels so replayable to me. In a way, Doom 2 feels like, oh man, this is a big mountain to climb with very few breaks along the way.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I wish that way more video games did the Doom 1 thing. Like, I think it's a really smart way to chunk up your game to allow you to get a lot out of the progression mechanics that you have. It's just we have so many games these days are loaded down with, like, really overwrought RPG and loot mechanics that become really exhausting to deal with because they're games that don't really need them, but they kind of have them partially because, so many games are so fucking long nowadays. And there's something about Doom of having this, like, sense of, oh, you've got some basic progression mechanics in Doom where it's like when you get a weapon for the first time, which is a big deal, and that's a big thing with a lot of the secrets in the early episodes, or the early missions of each episode of Doom, is like, how early can you get the plasma rifle? If you're getting all the secrets, you can get it super early. If you're not getting all the secrets, it's going to be really late, and you're going to have missed out on lots of ammo that you can't pick up because you don't have the gun yet. And then the other big thing you have is the ammo backpack that increases your overall ammo capacity, which once you get it once, you just always have that upgraded. And there is this just sense of, in Doom 1, that each episode you go through, you build up your arsenal, you get all that stuff, you get all this ammo, all to lead up to you killing whatever the boss is at the end of the episode. And then now you are on that treadmill again at the beginning of the next episode. And so you get to re-experience the, like, fuck, I've just got a pistol. Like, how do I get through this map with just a pistol? And the ways that those things are designed is like, how quickly can I get my plasma rifle? When can I get a rocket launcher? How can I stock back up on all those things I had, get the ammo upgrade, all of that? That's like a really invigorating part that refreshes that game. Where, Doom 2, just having 30 consecutive levels, where if you're playing the way that I play, where it's like, if I die, I reload a save. Like, I'm not fucking replaying the level from the beginning with just a pistol. That's very tedious to me. Obviously, you can play the game that way, but it's a PC shooter. It is designed to be save-scummed, as all PC shooters have always been. There is a reason why in the console ports they create quick load and quick save shortcuts. It's just the way that Doom is typically played. So unless you are, like, doing this playthrough where if you die, you straight up are just trying to restart that level with just a pistol, which, like, good luck, depending on what level you're playing, like, how the fuck you do that shit. If you're not doing that, then, well, I got the super shotgun on level 4 or 5 or whatever you get it, and then you have the super shotgun for the entire run of Doom 2. And I got the ammo backpack like super early. Well, now ammo backpacks are fucking pointless. It's just a couple of shots of ammo for all your guns. It's like it doesn't feel like it's worthy of a secret. And so the secrets in Doom 2 become so devalued because you've got most of the things those secrets can give you other than health and armor. Whereas in Doom 1, I feel like when I'm playing the early missions of an episode of Doom 1, I'm really frantic to find all the secrets, and I'm not willing to look past a secret because when I see that I haven't gotten one yet, because I want to get all the secrets because they feel really important. In Doom 2, at a certain point, I was in the, like, back half of that game, I would see that I had gotten 3 out of 7 secrets or whatever in the level and just be like, fuck it, I'm just going to finish the level. Like, it's not important because I'm not going to get anything. Chances are I'm going to open that secret and it's going to be something that doesn't actually give me anything because it's ammo for guns I'm already maxed up on or whatever. I might as well just move on rather than trying to scrounge around or potentially look up where the secret is and get like stubborn about it. And that's a thing that's a shame about Doom 2, that Doom 1 does kind of solved that problem, and then Doom 2 went in this different direction, and then no other games that I can think of have ever really done the Doom 1 thing again, even though I think it would benefit lots of games these days to consider implementing something like that resets your progression curve in a way that's very interesting without it necessarily being a roguelike or something like that.
Right. Roguelikes are probably the best example of something like this being done still. I think there's and obviously this is a genre that predates Doom, but platformers still basically keep this, that you have worlds, and that's a different in that it doesn't necessarily reset your progression, but for the game designer, it's sort of each new world in a Mario or Donkey Kong game gives you a sense of okay, this is a new set of kind of themes and a way for us to build the difficulty curve again from kind of 1 to 10 or however many we're going to have. And I think there's a very good reason why that is still a thing that you see in a Mario game or a Donkey Kong Country or something like that. Again, not 100% analogous, but is something I was thinking of as you were talking. And yeah, it is something that is probably qualitatively, I actually think the biggest difference between Doom 1 and Doom 2 is the way Doom 2 comes to feel like a bit of a muddle to me, in a way Doom 1 always feels very focused. Yeah. And some of the Doom spin-offs that you have in that port collection do build in sort of episodes, and that can be kind of fun in how those are built, but some of them are also just, here's 30 levels, and that can be exhausting. So, yeah. What else do we have to say about the original Doom games and why they kick so much ass?
The music. The music is so good. Oh my god, the music's so fucking good. One really awesome thing about the modern version that you can get is that it gives you the different options, right? So you can have the original MIDI synth versions, which is your classic Doom sound. You can also have different versions of FM synth, which is pretty fucking sick. If you're a Sega Genesis kid like I was, there's something wrong but beautiful about fucking getting an FM synth version of the Doom sounds, which for people who don't know, that's the same basic kind of synth that the Genesis used. And so it definitely has that really gnarly, harsh sound that the Genesis sound chip did. But then you also have that modern full version of it that's done with actual instrumentation and stuff, which was an old album. I wish I had the guy's name pulled up. I don't have it in front of me, but it's a guy who did this tribute Doom album.
Andrew Hulshult, is that him?
Yes,
yeah,
that's
the
him.
IDKFA soundtrack is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and they incorporated that, which is just a full modern full instrument version of the Doom soundtrack. Which is a great album, but I used to listen to all the time just on its own, and they implemented it directly into the game as the quote-unquote remix option, and then he made a whole album of the Doom 2 music as well, which they then put into Doom 2. And that's how I played through it this time, because I've played through these games multiple times with the original MIDI. The original MIDI is awesome, but it was particularly cool to get this different, it's the music of Doom, it's just done with, a modern musical fidelity that obviously would have been impossible. You couldn't do your Red Book CD audio or anything like that when original Doom came out, so you have to have your MIDI version. And it's cool to have a literal ripping guitar solo playing the E3 M2 song rather than the MIDI equivalent of a ripping guitar solo. As much as I love the MIDI versions, it is cool to have that as well. And it's just an awesome thing to incorporate into the package, because that's, I think, it was how that album was always designed, was hey, you can play Doom and put the music on mute and then just put on this album and just put the song for the E1M1 on repeat, and then when you go to E1M2, then you put the next song on the album and put that on repeat, and you just can play through the game that way, and you don't have to fuddle with any of that. You just, it's all there built into the modern version of the game, which is very fucking cool. But the point being that the music for Doom rips. It's so fucking good. Is a lot of it very blatant ripoffs of Iron Maiden and Megadeth and the popular metal bands of the late 80s and early 90s? Oh yes, it 100%. It's sometimes fairly shameless ripoffs of those bands. Never in a we are straight up just sort of copying, but it is very loving homages of that certain style of music. But it's just done so well. The music is such an essential part of the whole experience to me, and it's the one place where I can respect people who like the PS1 version of Doom and the Doom 64 music, which are both done by the same guy. That's much more environmental. But it is my biggest issue with Doom 64 is it's just not what I want from Doom. I recognize that there's cool stuff that he's doing with like the more horror inflected Doom vibe, and I can see where that comes from. But I want my ridiculous like that. I need that. I need the sick guitar solos. Or if it's going to be moody, I need like the long, overdrawn, like simulated slide guitar that would be from some 7-minute track in the mid that's super experimental and has no vocals in some fucking heavy metal album that you get for the slower songs in Doom. I'll take that vibe, but I just can't really fully truck with the kind of horror, industrial music thing that the PS1 and Doom 64 versions have.
I completely agree. And here's the thing. Doom 64, if it had music on par with Doom 93, Doom 2, might be my favorite Doom game. I think Doom 64
cool.
fucking rocks.
Yeah.
I love the look of it. It's kind of cool because I think Doom 64 has been overlooked by history in some ways because it's called Doom 64. And I think a lot of people, myself included for a long time, assumed it was the N64 port of Doom, but it's not. It's a completely new game. And it's like the actual Doom 3. Like, it's the next step of the Doom evolution. It has all the pieces from Doom 1 and Doom 2. It has those weapons, but it has new graphics. It has some new ideas in it. It's, it's somewhat modest as an update in some ways, but it is also very bold in others. Like, I think it does some really, really cool things with light and color and the environmental effects. I think it's got the balance between cool maze-like structure and interesting, engaging combat dialed in just the way I like it. But I do like the fact that the soundtrack, it honestly just feels kind of empty to me. It kind of feels like there's a layer missing to the game that, the modern id games with their absolutely ripping, never shut up guitar music, They knew what they were doing. There's a reason, the Doom music should never shut up, and that's part of it.
Yeah, it's just I kind of need to be able to hum the core melody of the song while I play Doom. I need that. That's, to me, it's part of what we're talking about with the rhythm and all of that. And obviously a big thing is that the songs of Doom and Doom 2 are just sort of burned into my subconscious because I have played these games a lot, and I also like to listen to remix albums of them. Because they're just fucking cool, and it turns out that lots of people have made very good remix versions of all the Doom music with sicker guitar solos and stuff like that. And so there's a familiarity to it, but I do think there's something kind of like a platformer, which I think a platformer has a similar kind of thing where platformer games need music that has strong hooks in the melody and stuff like that, because it's just part of the flow and the rhythm of the game, and getting kind of wrapped up into humming the Emerald Hill Zone theme at the beginning of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is part of how I cue into the rhythm of that game and playing that game and get into the flow state with it. Whereas obviously there are other games like a Resident Evil where if you did that in Resident Evil, it would be very fucking weird, and I'd be like, why are you doing this? I want my bizarre industrial weird horror music with that, because that's part of the whole vibe and mood there. And it's just, I just can't really get behind it. I totally get why there are some people who really like those versions of Doom and like that music for Doom, and I can understand why if you're coming at the games from a different point of view, but I just can't really go there.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And definitely my biggest complaint with Doom 64, which otherwise I heartily recommend and very much love that game. But really, you can't go wrong with a lot of Doom stuff. Sean, I've never played Doom 3. I know I do own the port on either Nintendo Switch or PS5. I forget which one. I've never really gotten into it. Have you ever played Doom 3? It's the one that I don't know a lot about.
Yeah, I intended to play some of it for this podcast, but stuff got fucking insane at work the last 2 weeks. So I've just not been in the mood to play a kind of more horror-y version of a Doom game. It's just not been kind of in the cards for me. But yes, it's one that I keep on intending. I own like 5 different versions of that fucking game. I've got Doom 3 on PC. I've got Doom 3 BFG edition on PC. I feel like I own 2 versions of it on PlayStation. I probably have the fucking Xbox 360 version. I don't know, but I've just, for whatever reason, have never actually gotten around to playing it. I do think one thing with Doom 3 to me is because you do have the 2 camps of Doom 3, right? You've got the OG Doom 3 that like infamously does not allow you to use the flashlight and the gun at the same time. And then you've got the BFG edition / the duct tape mod edition that allows
Best
you
name
to
for a mod in the history of mods. So
Yes.
good.
But that's the one that allows you to have the flashlight and the gun up at the same time. And my heart tells me to just play the original version, and because that sounds fucking amazing. Like, I love the idea that you're like, no, fuck it. No, you cannot use the flashlight and the gun at the same time. But there is that because there are those 2 versions. I do think it's one of the things that that it's hard to just start totally on a whim. That I feel that I have to make a very active choice if I'm going to play Doom 3. But I want to play it, and I wish I had had time to play it or been in the mindset to play it for this podcast.
Does the port that's on modern consoles allow you to play the original version, or is it just the BFG edition?
I don't know. I want to say it's just the BFG edition, but I'm not sure if there's like a toggle that allows you to change that or not.
Yeah, it would be really cool if they did have, like you said, a toggle or something, but it is just called Doom 3 BFG. Yeah, okay, I think it is the BFG edition, is what I'm seeing here, so there you go. But yes, it is. I do just want to stress again, even though I agree that the idea of, no, gun or flashlight, I think that's a cool design idea, even though I haven't played the game. But the mod, just called duct tape, is the funniest name for a mod ever. Of like, yeah, the Doom guy could just tape the flashlight to his gun, is fucking great.
Yes. Or, considering that, all modern rifles have for decades at this point had, the ability to attach a flashlight to the gun. I'm sure that in the distant future where we fucking colonized Mars, they probably would have thought through a way to deal with what if the lights got turned off. It's like,
Yes.
it's like from a gameplay design, it's a really cool idea. From a immersion and all that kind of stuff, it is a very ridiculous gameplay conceit that is totally understandable why people would look at that and say fuck that shit, but it is the version that I think when I get around to playing it, and I will get around to playing it, I'm almost certain I'll play the original version, and if I get very frustrated and feel like that is a bad choice, then maybe I'll switch over to the BFG version.
Yeah, so look forward to our Doom 3 podcast whenever the next id Bethesda game comes out.
Yes.
Doom the Dark Ages 2, I don't know. That'll probably be a while. In any case, for now, do you want to move on to talk about a movie called Doom?
Hell yeah. Let's talk about Doom.
We are talking about now the 2005 film adaptation of Doom, from that, very 2000s era of video game adaptations that were mostly unhappy to be there.
Yes.
I'm thinking of like Timothy Olyphant Hitman and that kind of thing as well. This one was directed by Andrei Bartkowiak. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, and I apologize. He is the acclaimed auteur behind such films as Romeo Must Die, Cradle to the Grave, which is not a sequel to anything. There's not a Cradle 1 the Grave, but it is spelled with a 2, the number, Cradle to the Grave. And the film Street Fighter, The Legend of Chun-Li, everyone's least favorite Street Fighter movie, starring Karl Urban as John Reaper Grimm, The Rock as Sergeant Asser Sarge Mahonen, and Rosamund Pike as Dr. Samantha Grimm. This is Doom 2005. I think it's a pile of shit. What did you think, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd go so far to say it's a total pile of shit. Like, there are parts of the movie that I did find entertaining. It is a movie that has a lot of problems, and it is just way too long for what it is. But I don't want to totally dismiss it as being purely a pile of shit. It's not a good movie, to be clear, but it's a movie that I can actually see a version of this movie that's decent. And
I can too. It's called Alien, and it's called Aliens.
Sure.
And here's where we have to address the problem that video games are haunted and are always going to be haunted by is that Alien and Aliens exist. The Ridley Scott Alien, the James Cameron Aliens, many, many, many video games, Doom included, are somewhat inspired by Alien and Aliens. And when you go to take those games and turn them into movies, this is why you're never going to be able to make a Halo movie. Because a Halo movie is just Aliens.
Yes.
Because Halo took so liberally from Aliens that, like, its entire, mise-en-scène and a lot of its dialogue writing and all of that is just so pulled from James Cameron's Aliens that if you watch Aliens today and you're a Halo fan, I showed my brother Aliens last year and he went, how inspired was Halo? He's like, this feels like it's a Halo movie. I'm like, well, that's because Halo was Aliens the game. And, like, about 95% of Doom 3 is a knockoff of either Alien when it's trying to be kind of slow and methodical and let's go around corridors and look very, scared, or Aliens when we're firing our guns fast and things are running at us. And, like, it just feels like such a knockoff of that with so little of, like, any Doom sort of character to it. Like, the music doesn't feel Doom. It's not fast-paced in the way I would associate with Doom. All of that kind of stuff. And so it just feels like a direct, one of those, like, Transmorphers that you would, like, buy at Walmart as trying to fool your parents into buying you Transformers, but it's Transmorphers. It feels like that, to me, like, direct-to-DVD bargain bin Aliens knockoff. Other than, I think the first-person sequence is kind of interesting and fun. When we get to that, it was also made by a completely different team. It is a separate movie within the movie, and I like that separate movie a fair bit because I think it's kind of fun. The rest of it, tears of boredom streaming down my face.
Yeah, for me, it's like there are moments where I think it captures into a B-movie schlocky energy that I could enjoy. And I think there are good parts to the movie. Like, there's some, like, of the effects and some of the ideas. Like, it very much is a movie it's basically the same movie as the original Resident Evil Milla Jovovich movie. Like, it's basically just that. Like, it's just that movie. Where it's like, it's got these, like, moments of, yeah, like, this is kind of fun. Like, is it ridiculous? Yes. Is it totally derivative of Aliens and several other things? Absolutely. But it can have, like, a fun, in its own way, kind of quality to it, in a way that I can truck with some of the, like, Transmorphers or, like, Sharknado or stuff like that. Like, those kinds of movies can be fun, even if they're not, like, good. But even this doesn't. That's, I think, for me, like, the big crime of this movie is it doesn't get that. It like gets close to it, and there are moments where you can kind of feel it. But it also just has lots of times where it just has, like, a really clear setup, that where there's just, like, moments that it could do so much with, and then it whiffs on them super hard. Not as, and to be clear, like, this is not a, like, for it to be a good Doom movie. I think it's so off the base of being, like, a good representation of Doom as a concept on film. At a certain point, pretty early on, you just abandoned that entire, at least I abandoned that entire, like, I'm watching this for Doom things.
Well, it's like that early generation of video game movies, like Resident Evil, like Super Mario Bros., like Hitman, where it's just the name and the IP, and, like, Hollywood had such contempt for games as source material that it would take the name, but it didn't want to touch the substance of it. And that's part of why these just feel like such relics of a different time. Yes. I mean, that's something we're only starting to kind of get over, to, I think, very mixed results now, but yeah.
But yes, yeah, but I think, like, beyond it is just an insane representation of Doom. Although, to be fair to the movie, the game that it clearly resembles the most is Doom 3, and neither of us have actually played through Doom 3. But that is, like, of the Doom games, that's the one it has the closest DNA to. But also, this is a movie in which there aren't any demons, and they're not from hell. And it's like, well, fuck. That feels like you missed maybe the first thing that you need. Here's the first two things you need in Doom. One, they're on Mars. Two, it's demons. That's it. If you don't do those
comparable.
Two,
it's very comparable to the Mario Brothers movie, where they are not brothers, they're father and son, and they're in New York. It's like, it's just immediately you're off. You're not making the thing.
Yeah, but but even if you put that stuff aside, there's just, like, there are moments where I was kind of willing to get into the movie, and then it just kept on, particularly once it got closer and closer to the ending. It's just, like, it drags so fucking much. And yeah, like, you do get this injection of energy in the first person sequence, but that is almost like dooms the movie even more, because then you have to leave that first person sequence and then go back to what the actual movie was, and you're like, fuck, God, this movie ran out of steam like 40 minutes ago. And yes, that to me is my big take on it. Like I think that there is a schlocky B movie that could have been a good time here, in the vein of like, I will watch an old fucking Gamera movie that is way worse than this in most ways, but like nails the couple of things it needs to do really well to be entertaining with the giant monsters and all that kind of some of the goofier shit. There are moments where I can see it approaching that kind of movie, which I think is a wholly appropriate movie for a Doom movie to be. I am fine with the Doom movie being incredibly schlocky and kind of bad and rough around the edges in lots of ways, but it gives you these like moments that are really awesome. I'm fine with that. But this movie approaches that at times, and then it just totally misses it and never really lands any of those moments. And so it doesn't even get to the Resident Evil movie thing of the big fucking laser hallway scene that's so kind of famous because it's fucking cool, where it's like, that movie at least has that scene, and that's a fucking awesome scene, and it's a great execution of that idea, and it's fucking cool. There's no like clip of the Doom movie. I would even say the first person sequence, which is like a novel. I find it like that interesting. I find it interesting from a novel perspective more than I did I'm experiencing this as an audience member and being invested in it as like a production. I don't even think of that first person thing you've seen is to that level. And so this is not a movie I feel like I will ever revisit I want to see that clip on YouTube way, which is like, I absolutely want to see Gamera fight gear on YouTube, and I will watch that clip, and I will watch the clip of the Resident Evil hallway scene because it's cool. I'm not going to watch that fucking movie again, but I'll watch that clip and I'll have a good time. That's never going to happen with me in this Doom film, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that pretty well sums it up. I mean, I think part of it is that this is a problem that a lot of these kinds of movies run into. The plot is so overdone. There's so much going on in this movie. At a certain point, I tune it out and can't follow it. It's something about, like, cloning, and there's these different DNA structures, and this one relates to this one, and then we've done this with the thing, and there's the doctor's dead, and then we have the flashback, and and it's like, guys, it's Doom. It's Doom. Like, what are we doing plot at all for, honestly? It should be killing aliens on the moon. No, it should be killing demons on Mars. Sorry, on Mars. I said the moon. That's the Destiny movie, is killing wizards on the moon. This would be killing, demons on Mars. And even the things it's ripping off, like Aliens is a longer movie, but it has a much simpler plot. There's like a couple of twists and turns, but it's mainly, there are aliens, let's kill them, right? And you can make a movie out of that, and we know because they've seen that movie clearly, from how stylistically it's ripping that off. And I think that's one of the things that just kills it, because I think that and the B-movie thing are pretty incompatible, because it's really hard for the performances, which several of these are by actors I very much enjoy. It's really hard for them to dial in when they have to have so much plot exposition. I think Karl Urban and Rosamund Pike could absolutely do the B-movie schlock version of this that is being asked of them. They are very versatile actors. Karl Urban later did the Judge Dredd movie, the one just called Dredd, and he's perfect in that. And that is much closer to what I think this kind of thing should have been. Mm-hmm. That Dredd movie, which is very focused, it's 90 minutes on the dot, it has a goal, it goes through it, and Karl Urban can do that kind of pulp really well, and I think Rosamund Pike could too. I think The Rock at this point in his career was not dialed in. He's not a good actor yet, and I think you can see that here. It's very Scorpion King energy to me, this version of The Rock. We're not at, him in Fast and Furious yet. Sorry, do you disagree?
Well, I'm not going to say that I think he's a good actor in this movie, but his was my favorite performance. I liked The Rock. I liked the energy The Rock brought. I felt like it, I think for me, the biggest shock of this whole movie was, before I even watched the movie, was when we decided to watch it and you looked up some stuff about it. You're like, yeah, and Karl Urban is the main guy. And I was like, what? In my brain, I was like, it's not The Rock? It's my memory of this movie is that they made a Doom movie, nobody liked it, but The Rock was in it. And it blew my mind that The Rock is not the main dude. But there's something about his character, Sarge, where he's so fucking just exasperated by the bullshit the scientists are doing. That is, like, for me, the best B-movie part of the whole thing is you have all this ridiculous shit that you find out the scientists, all this, like, there's alien fucking ruins that we found the aliens have, like, you know, made themselves like perfect life forms or whatever, and all this bullshit. And then you eventually learn that, like, the scientists fucking got, like, you know, prisoners brought them to Mars and injected them with, like, the alien DNA, and that all that then went crazy. And as more and more of the, like, insane shit these scientists did for seemingly no clearly explained reason happens, just his character gets more and more like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what is going on? And he's just looking at these, like, giant monsters and all this shit, like, embedded in their fucking crazy, like, you know, particle wall or whatever that thing was called. And he's just like, fucking fuck off. And then the moment he just decides, like, they have the one guy who is the Carmack, the character named Carmack, who's the scientist who got turned to a monster, and he's, like, frozen in that wall, which is a cool effect. And they're like, and I think that we can turn him back. And then The Rock just takes his gun out and shoots the thing in the head. And I'm like, yes, thank you, Rock. Because what the fuck are you talking about? You think you can turn him back? He's a giant, crazy zombie monster thing. You know, it's like their version of the Hell Barons from Doom. Like, he's not... Like, what is he going to turn back into? Because it's not going to be human. Look at the fucking thing. And The Rock just decided, I'm just going to kill every single person involved in what's happening here. That is my favorite part of the movie. I enjoyed that. The Rock is not, like, it's not a good performance, but it's the performance I want in a Doom movie. And I wish the rest of the movie, honestly, was on The Rock's level. Because at least I would have... That would have given it a more of a Gamera-like quality to me if they had gone to that place.
So, okay, I think you're totally right on that. And I think, like, and this is what I mean by it's hard to be dialed in, because I think I don't want to be too hard on The Rock, because I think, yes, I think he probably is bringing the right energy for a better version of this movie. It's just tough when you're ping-ponging between that and Karl Urban, who has been directed as if he is in a very serious drama, yes, and Rosamund Pike, who's, like, sort of in that direction, but I think a little more winking, but not winking enough. And so, like, when you're just ping-ponging between those things, I don't think anyone's performance works here. And these are all actors I like to different degrees. That, like, yeah, it just becomes grating. And, like, when you're describing it out of context, I can understand enjoying all those moments that The Rock has. In context, it's just so hard to, like, get on the movie's wavelength with any of this. Because of, I think, that general tonal confusion.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. And it is one thing that is also, I think, frustrating that I feel for Karl Urban and Rosamund Pike is that they make the decision that they both have to be American. And yes, I don't feel like either their American accents are there at this point in their careers. You know, this is very early for them. And so the scenes where those two characters, the brother and sister, have to talk to each other, it's just painful because you're just like, fuck, dude, like, I just can't imagine that the Doom movie, you know, went out of the way to get, like, the level of, like, dialect coaching and stuff like that these actors need. Because to be clear, I'm not blaming them. I don't think that they're bad. Doing an accent like that for a movie is very hard, and the actor needs sufficient support in order to do it. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that they probably did not get the support from the fucking Doom movie.
Also, it's Doom. They can just have their accents. Like, what's the fucking problem?
Yeah, it would be so much better if Karl Urban could just be from fucking Space New Zealand or whatever and just let him fucking go with his fucking normal accent. It'd be fine. I don't even care that Karl Urban and Rosamund Pike have different accents. Let them go with their normal accents. Who fucking cares that they're supposed to be brother and sister and all that shit? It just, like, it's because I think it's one of the things that brings the energy down of both of those actors is that's, like, they're being asked, as you said, to play it super seriously for a character named Reaper. Fucking Karl Urban's dude is so just sort of dour and just low energy. And I think if he just had a little bit more, could bring the Kiwi into it a little bit more, it just would have lightened the whole production. And it's just, yeah, like the accent thing is a little bit baffling to me and frustrating. Because I was very excited to see Karl Urban, because I had no idea he was in this movie. Because, again, I thought this was just a movie that had The Rock, and maybe that was it. Like, I didn't know the movie had other actors in it at a certain point. but it just like you just feel Karl Urban so inhibited by what the movie is doing, that you don't get the kind of performance that you know he could give even at the time. But obviously, like with hindsight, when we've seen him in stuff like Dread or more recently The Boys, the Amazon show, is exactly this fucking energy. Like he can do that really fucking well. You should just let him play a dude named John Reaper Grimm and let him properly play that character. It just feels like they didn't give him the opportunity to do that.
So let's talk about the first person sequence, because here's the thing. It's not the most amazing piece of filmmaking. But what I do think is interesting about it is that it is an honest-to-God attempt to translate the language of video games to the language of cinema. And I think it is, like, creatively doing that. Like, the movie suddenly, to me, has a pulse. It's trying out things. I find it engaging to watch. I still think it makes some weird choices for this being a Doom movie, like having scopes and doing reloading and all those things that, like, the games famously eschew. But, like, it does kind of feel like Doom for a little bit. It feels like cheekier. It feels sleazier, but in a fun, productive, like, qualitative way. And it also feels, but this is also what's jarring, is it is completely separate from the rest of the film. Like, to the point that I didn't know this until after the movie. I got the DVD of the movie, the unrated cut. I don't know what was unrated about it, but that's what I was watching. And it had a bonus feature about this sequence, and I learned watching that that was a different movie. It was made by a completely different director. The film's VFX supervisor handled it. Totally different crew. It was done completely by the second unit, who planned it out for like 3 months. They shot it over several weeks. So what you're really watching is a separate Doom short film that has been cut into the middle of a movie that has nothing to do with Doom. And that is the most fascinating thing about this movie. And I think if you cut the first person scene out and you told me, like, this is a fan film someone made in 2005, I would go, that's really cool. Like, as a fan movie, like, this is way better than that, like, Uncharted fan movie we got with Nathan Fillion, like that thing, which I don't think is very good and doesn't feel very Uncharted to me. This is like a cool, impressive, like, attempt at doing a short proof-of-concept Doom thing, and I enjoy seeing it for that. And I think it has a small but significant place in the history of movies' relationship with video games. I am teaching a class in the fall at CU Boulder about sort of media convergence, video games, film, TV, all of that. And part of why I wanted to watch Doom when you said maybe we should watch this, Sean, is that, okay, well, this would be good for me to have seen for that class. I will obviously not be showing this movie to that class, but I'll probably be showing that scene. Like, that clip is an interesting clip. You know, there's a whole history of movies adapting first-person views, and how do they do that, and what do they do with it, and I think this scene is an interesting, semi-accomplished version of that. Like, honestly, the Doom guy, even though Karl Urban is nowhere in this scene, it is somebody else playing that character for all of that, and adopting the position of the camera. I think he has more personality through how the camera is moving through that character than Karl Urban is ever allowed to have in full view of the camera. But it is this super weird thing that it is just a fully different movie edited into this movie. And then, as you said, Sean, when you have to go back and watch, like, the absolutely excruciatingly long final Karl Urban, The Rock confrontation at the end of this movie, it's just killer. Because it's like, guys, that should have been the end of your movie, because it's the best scene you had. End on that. Don't go back to the fucking bullshit. Jesus.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very jarring, that transition. And I do think that, like, I think that first person sequence is interesting, and maybe it's because I have had it weirdly hyped up, because that's the thing that, like, people talk about with this movie. It was like, oh, the movie's shit, but that part was cool. Is a thing I have heard repeated on various podcasts and stuff for a very long time, because this is a very old movie. That, like, actually watching it, I was like, hey, it's fine. Like, you know, like, I don't think, like, the direction of the action is actually that interesting. I do think that they struggle a bit with making the first person POV, like, very clear and readable. It's also very, like, kind of dark scene. You know, like, I was expecting there's, you know, one of the like, covers for the DVD and stuff of this movie has, like, The Rock in this very brightly lit hallway, which looks like a hallway in Doom. So in my mind's eye, I've always pictured that scene was probably in that area or something. I also always just assumed that The Rock was the dude who you're seeing through the eyes of, I feel like I was very much lied by the marketing of this film. But it's like the actual scene is in this very dark, foggy, it looks like Doom 3, much more than Doom 1 and Doom 2 in terms of overall aesthetic style. And so I just found it to be not as legible as I would have wanted to be. And then I also didn't think that the majority of that action sequence is him fighting the Pinky Demon, which we have to address that in a second with all that shit, with the naming of certain things. But I just didn't find that, like, it doesn't have the right pacing. Like, it's a little bit too slow and lumbering for me. And I think, like, the energy of it is not quite where I wanted it to be. And so it's a thing that I kind of intellectually enjoyed. And I definitely think it has more life to it than the other action sequences in the movie, to be clear, because I don't think the other more traditionally shot action sequences, particularly the climax, are good. I think this is better than those because it is at least a novel. But it is also not as good of an execution of the concept as I kind of was hoping it would be coming into the film, especially at this point. My sort of prospect on the film was rather dire because all the stuff I kind of liked about it had kind of passed, and I was just sort of stuck with what the movie was. And then they give this, and I'm like, it's fine, but I only think it's fine. I think is the level it rises to.
No, and I think I probably agree. I've seen all of the big first-person, movies that try this thing, and I don't think it's ever fully worked, particularly in an action context. There's more art house stuff that does this that can work better. But, like, I've also seen, the thing that this tees up, obviously, is Hardcore Henry, and I don't think that movie's very good either. I think part of the problem with this translation, if you think... Let's get film studies brain here for a second, Sean. If you think ontologically about what this is doing, it says this. We say this is the first-person sequence. It's really a second-person sequence. In a video game, this is first-person because you are controlling it, because those are literally your eyes, and the sticks or the mouse are your input mechanism into the control. But when you take that very gamic setup and translate it, and again, there are other ways to do the first-person viewpoint in a film that are not the video game version of it, you're really making it a second-person thing, because it's saying you are this person. It's like the book, Bright Lights, Big City, where it's you do this, you do that, because you go from looking at Karl Urban to being told you are Karl Urban, and you don't have, and I say second person because you don't have agency in it. It's that point of view is happening to you and you are being told to inhabit it, but you don't have that, you don't even have the level of interaction you would have in the theme park ride version of this, where you would at least have like Star Tours or something where you feel everything moving and that engages you more. And so I think there is this kind of film language ontological problem in just taking the video gamic visual outlook structure, putting it in a movie, but not considering that it really is a completely different language at that point when you've taken away the controller, when you've taken away, the chair moving at Disneyland. And I don't think any of these that I've seen account for that enough to be fully worth the effort. But I do think, from a historical standpoint, it is still, as a scholar, it is an interesting sequence. It's not I think I described this in my Letterboxd take. It's an asterisk on something else in film history. It's not its own place in film history. But as an asterisk, it's worthwhile.
Yes, it's like a footnote in the footnote.
Yeah.
Here's that Doom sequence. I also think, just from a filmmaking perspective, that this sort of technique done for an action sequence just does not sort of gel with 24 frames per second to me. I just don't think your filmic frame rate does not work when your camera is moving so frantically, but you're also, because it's your whole view, it's very, very disorienting in a way that I just kind of find vaguely uncomfortable. And I think this is if you wanted to do something like this, the thing to do it would be to do your high frame rate film experiment kind of stuff, like a Gemini Man. If you want to do those kinds of sequences, there's a reason why first-person games in particular benefit from higher frame rates within the world of video games, because that level of motion clarity, when so much is moving, because the whole perspective is moving in a three-dimensional sense, that level of motion clarity is much more useful than like a locked kind of perspective, with like with a side scroller or top down kind of view sort of thing.
And they're not unaware of this in the Doom movie. They have him move very slowly. And I think part of that is because of the technology they're using and to composite everything and to try to make it readable enough, but also because I think they know that if they whip the camera around too much, in 24 FPS, that stops being legible.
Yeah. And it's a shackle on that sequence that I think as the audience you can kind of feel, and so you just get this kind of compromised version of the idea. But it is one of, if not the most interesting thing about the entire film. It does have that. One thing I put a pin in that we need to bring up is some of the name stuff they do here. Because this movie has basically no relationship in any substantial sense to Doom, at least certainly not the classic Doom games. But they do the most like of its era thing where somebody in some boardroom at some point was like, well, what's some proper nouns from Doom we can put in here? It was like, well, there's the Pinky Demon. It's like, great, let's name a character Pinky and have him turn into the Pinky Demon at the end of the movie. And it's just so grating. I just found that so like, fuck you. That's so fucking dumb. And they have the one dude who is named Carmack, who's played by Doug Jones, which is cool, and he's in the costume. Wikipedia credits him as Carmack Imp, and I don't know if that's because the character is... Oh, wait, no, sorry. I'm reading this wrong. So Doug Jones is in the costume. They have Robert Russell is playing Todd Carmack. Okay. Because they only ever called that dude Carmack, and I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be that character's last name or first name. So when I saw in the credits Doug Jones as Carmack Imp, I'm like, what is going on there? But that dude is supposed to be just called Carmack. I don't know why Carmack is the only id guy that they fucking call out here. There's no fucking Dr. Romero's nowhere in that space station. But I do wish that they had just gone even further with it. Why is there only one dude who's called Pinky? Like, why can't we have like Archie Vile over there in the corner in Manny Okubus or something? Like, I want all the characters to be just like bad versions of the names of monsters from Doom that then turn into those monsters. Because
there should be a character named monsters. Yeah, there should be a character named Kaka D Mon.
Yes,
and that can be one of them. Yeah.
Yes, and I just want them to be, because part of the thing of where it's very like growth-inducing is they're like introducing the people after they transport through, because there's some of the other scientists there, and he's like, my name is Marcus Pinzarowski, but you can call me Pinky. And I just wish that he just went and like, over there, that's Archie Vile, and that's Manny, blah, blah, blah. It's like, and this guy, he's the mastermind of the operation, and we call him Spider. I just want that. Again, that would have just been a much better movie. But when it's just this one dude, Pinky, it fucking sucks. It's so fucking just, it's very lame. There's just a couple other things about the movie that are also incredibly lame. Part of my overall take that I said earlier was that it has a lot of things like setups that it just fucks up. A couple of those that come to mind is the BFG stuff, right? So they've got that scene where they've encountered the monsters, and The Rock decides he needs to go to the armory, and he has this line where he says like something like, we're going to need more firepower. And then eventually they show him in the armory, and they do this big shot of this like 360 shot around the BFG, and you have this terrible, awful 80-yard line from The Rock going, big fucking gun. And it's just got no fucking energy or juice to it. And it hurt my soul, because the moment when it became clear, like, oh, what's going to happen next is we're going to get the BFG, because they set up that he had seen the big force gun or whatever on the database. He's like, I'm going to have to go to the armory. And immediately my brain lit up with like the line that must be here, that like scientifically speaking, the line to insert next is him to say, we're going to need a bigger fucking gun. And it would have been just two birds with one stone. You get your BFG reference and you get a Jaws reference at the same time. And it's just, it hurts so much that they don't do that. They go, we're going to need more firepower. And then fucking 10 minutes later, big fucking gun. It's like, The Rock, you can tell The Rock wanted to say we're going to need a bigger fucking gun. It would have been so good. And it would have saved the movie. Probably not, but I want to say that it would have. And then the other big one that this is just a fucking mystery to me is in the climactic fight between Karl Urban and The Rock, which is basically just a professional wrestling match, but bad. There's the whole thing where they set up at the beginning of the movie, you have that crazy fucking wormhole thingy, which is kind of a cool effect for its time, that they go into, and they set up at the beginning your Chekhov's gun of Pinky is in his big wheelchair thingy because he got cut in half by that thing fucking up. And so at the end of the movie, when Karl Urban has nothing to fight with and The Rock's kicking his ass, but then he turns on the wormhole thing and they're both getting sucked into it, and The Rock is like halfway through the wormhole and there's a timer going down. How is the ending of that scene not the timer ends while The Rock is halfway through it and he gets fucking cut in half and his legs get transported to Mars, but his torso is still here, and he just flocks to the fucking ground dead and a pile of gore? Like, that would have, not made the whole scene good, but it would have been a great way to end that fight. Instead, he just kicks The Rock. The Rock goes all the way through the portal, and then Karl Urban throws a fucking grenade through the portal, and then The Rock basically blows up off-screen on Mars. Like, what a terrible, limp, fucking wet towel ending to your goddamn movie. It's just unbelievable. You had such an easy setup that the movie did. Like, the movie did all the work to set up a cool death for The Rock's character, and they picked the lamest fucking way to kill him off. And I just couldn't fucking stomach that that's how this movie goes. I mean, it's so fucking pathetic that that's the choice you fucking make.
I think it's entirely in keeping with the rest of the movie. I think it makes sense.
I mean, it's in keeping with the rest of the movie, but it's still just, because it gets...
No, it sucks. It sucks, yeah.
Where I wanted to believe that this movie could be entertaining on that schlocky level, and it just fucks it up all the time. And then again, you get another one 5 minutes later, because now while I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, I'm remembering the actual ending of the movie, where he picks up his sister and he goes up the elevator to get up to Earth. And it's the clearest setup for your Doom 2 Hell on Earth, where what should happen is he gets all the way to the top, the fucking doors open, he steps out, and Earth is being invaded by the fucking monsters. Obviously, they're not literally demons, but there's this infectious disease or whatever. And, and then, have the camera pan over and there's a fucking rabbit, and then there's a rabbit with its head on a spike, and you do your Doom thing, and it would have been fucking awesome. I mean, you don't have to do the rabbit stuff. But that's so clearly like the ending the movie wants. It feels like honestly, it feels like the ending it sets up, because it kind of feels pretty clear to me that there's no way that Karl Urban actually stopped this shit, because he was fucking passed out for like an hour when he got injected with the super virus or whatever. And so surely some of this shit got up onto the surface in the meantime while he was unconscious and all this shit went down to The Rock, got infected and everything. And for it just to end with him going up and it's like, oh no, I guess everything's fine and they're just going to go home now. This is fucking goddamn it. It's very frustrating, because this movie could have had just all I'm asking for from the movie is the bare minimum, and it just couldn't even like muster that up in the ending stretch.
It's funny, we started this conversation with me sounding more upset, but I think I've come to peace with it, and we're ending it with you sounding more upset, which is funny.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had sort of like forgotten the entire movie, because it's been a week since I watched it, because we were originally planning to do this conversation last week. But yes, I think it's because I did legitimately enjoy parts of the movie early on. Like, I was into the schlocky Aliens ripoff of here's all these shitty fucking Space Marine dudes who all suck and all that stuff, and them just like slowly getting killed off, and The Rock getting progressively more upset at the incredibly ridiculous shit the scientists have been doing, and they constantly learn some other ridiculous shit the scientists had been doing. He just gets more and more mad until he just decides to kill everybody. Up until that point, the movie wasn't good, but I was entertained by it. And then after that, it's just like the movie just completely ran out of anything, and it just becomes totally limp. And it's like the most it can muster is we made a Doom fan movie. Let's show that for you to like distract you for a little bit until you come back to the reality that we haven't had anything to do for this movie for 40 minutes.
Well, that's Doom, Sean. Some good games, a bad movie, and eventually we'll play Doom. Have you played Doom: The Dark Ages yet? Any of it yet?
I've played the first like 4 or 5 levels. It's cool. I've not played enough to have like a cogent take on it or anything, because also I've only played it at the end of work days when I've been very tired. So I don't feel like I have a sort of like, other than it, I have shot things in the face with shotguns. I've hit things in the face with a big flail. I've thrown Captain America style shield at some stuff, and that was fun. And I'm very excited to play more of it. But I've only played like a couple hours.
Okay. I haven't played any of it yet. I have not gotten it yet because I am, after this podcast, leaving to go house sit for my mom for a week because she is leaving town, and I don't want to schlep my PS5 around. I'm too old for that shit, so I will play it when I get back. That is my view. But we will talk about it on the next Purely Academic, of course. But that'll be our Stuff Purely Academic, our monthly Stuff episode in early June. But for our June topic, we have decided to torture ourselves for your enjoyment some more.
Yep.
And we are doing an episode that we are calling Fantastic 4x4. We are going to talk, in anticipation of the new Marvel Cinematic Universe take on the Fantastic Four, which is called the Fantastic Four First Steps and is coming out in July. We are going to look back on the first 4 Fantastic Four movies, because the one that Marvel is putting out is the 5th time Hollywood has tried this. And, maybe we'll see if the fifth time is not the charm. This is officially the most cursed comic brand in terms of adaptation. It might already be. I feel like if Marvel can't get this one right with the cast they've got this time, there will never be a good Fantastic Four movie. But we will be talking about the 4 that exist. The never officially released but easy to find The Fantastic Four from 1994. That is the Roger Corman one that was made. Actually, most of these were made to protect the rights before they reverted to Marvel, but that was one of the ones made to protect the rights before it reverted.
Always the best impetus to make a creative project is, shit, we're going to lose the rights. We gotta fucking do something, guys. That's just always produced the greatest heart in the history of the human race.
Then the 2 Fox ones, Fantastic Four 2005 and Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer 2007, the ones with Chris Evans before he was Captain America. And then Fant4stic, the last Fox one, also made to secure the rights, and then they just willingly gave them up because fuck it. That movie was bad. And then I guess they also sold to Disney. But anyway, and that's the one from 2015. 3 of those, the ones that you would expect, are on Disney Plus, except for the one that obviously isn't, and you're going to have to go find yourself, and that's the Corman one. The other 3 are easy to find, again, on Disney Plus, and that is what we will be talking about for our topic next month. I don't drink, but I might have to start if we're going to get through all these movies.
I don't know, Jonathan. I mean, just look at them. If there's one thing we're guaranteed, all 4 of these movies will be fantastic.